rights of people in society without the expectation of getting fees for it. So this kind of activism, both kinds, are very important for the growth of our society. Now, first of all, the conservative view was that the constitution is there, and there the judges have only right to interpret whether anything is unconstitutional or constitutional as it stands. And the laws will be passed by parliament, and the judges will have no right to frame laws or shape laws. They can only say whether a law is constitutional or is not constitutional. This was and the role of lawyers was to accept fees from people and represent them, whether they believed in them or not believed in them, whether they were guilty or innocent. Lawyers their work was just to accept the fees and appear before the court. Now that has undergone change since 1981, when the S.P. Gupta case framed a new idea. I think Justice Bhagwati was the presiding judge there, that those who cannot come to court, they can also be represented by a lawyer, even if they don't come to court, even if they don't sign the Wakalatnama. Any person can, in the public interest, he can come to court and represent them. So a lawyer had come, his name was S.P. Gupta, who represented the bonded laborers, who he said cannot come to court. They don't have enough money even to get proper clothes, what to talk about paying lawyers' fees. And there are large numbers. So there needs to be a collective decision for the collective. And that's how the concept of public interest litigation started. Those who cannot represent themselves in court or engage a lawyer or pay for a lawyer, those people can be, their interests can be represented by a lawyer without having got their permission for it. In America, this is called class action. In our country, it is called public interest litigation. So that's how it began, and today we have two kinds of developments. One is a judicial overreach, as is being called. That is, the judges are no more only looking at what is constitutional, what is not constitutional. They are now looking to see whether we can modify certain things so that larger interests of the contemporary society is also serviced by this. I'll give you examples. But this judicial overreach is beyond their original duty, the conservative duty, of only finding out whether it is constitutional or not constitutional, or whether your rights have been snatched or not snatched. These are, in individual cases, they were dispensing justice. They also began now not only receiving public interest litigations, but they went a step further to see whether they can modify the laws. So that was a development which has come since the last 25 years. Now, for example, similarly, while this judicial overreach was there, individuals could also enter without getting a law degree. I don't have a law degree. I studied law at Harvard, but that was because I had become a professor at a very young age of 23 or 24, and I didn't know what to do with my time. So I went to class, and one side I learned Chinese language, and the other side I went to the Harvard Law School. But then I didn't take a degree because I was afraid that it might suck me from my principal love, which is economics, where I was a professor of economics. But today, litigants, they don't have to be a lawyer. Section 32 of the Advocates Act says that if any person says that I want Subramaniam Swamy and no one else, then the court will have to hear me, which they normally would not hear unless you are an advocate with a registration in the bar. But advocate, Article Section 32, and this we owe to a judgment of Krishna here, said that yes, if the judges are satisfied that this person can argue in a judicial way, even if he doesn't have a law degree, we can permit him. So in the beginning I used to ask for permission, the judges used to give me. But now I don't even ask for permission. And I find many people think I'm some senior counsel somewhere, and I get even some person saying my house has been demolished in Deoria, Uttar Pradesh, and please come and represent me. I will pay you the fees. I mean, the impression, because I've come so often before. So I am saying today that you, by becoming a lawyer, are getting a privilege. And that privilege is to represent people. Don't only devote your time 100% to collecting fees. There are lawyers like that, I know. But you try to give 50% of your time to social problems and 50% of time to earn an income for your comfort as well as for your law practice. So that is the first thing that we need to do. And such lawyers or legal minds, I call them by the title of legal eagles. They are like eagles watching, and legal eagles is a term, American term, and it denotes those lawyers who are ready to take up social issues and fight it in court. Now let me give you some examples. Take the judicial overreach. There was a time under Article 368, you can amend the constitution. 2/3 of Lok Sabha and 2/3 of Rajya Sabha passed something that the constitution could be amended. And it was amended. Now I think about 116 amendments are there, or something like that. When Mrs. Gandhi came to power in 1971, a big majority, and she started amending left, right and center. Some people got worried that she may amend the constitution to say that the Nehru family is the royal family of India and put it in the constitution. And Article 368 could be amended. So like that, all kinds of worries were that she might restrict democracy. In fact, in the emergency, that fear came true. So there was a very famous case where the Supreme Court decided that the amending power of Parliament, this is real judicial overreach, amending power of Parliament is restricted by the basic structure of the Constitution. And what is the basic structure? That was given later on in 1994 in the Bommai case, where they said democracy is basic structure, multi-party system, secularism. 5, 6, you go to the Bommai case, you will see they are given illustrative. So Parliament can no more have the facility to amend anything and everything under Article 368. Article 368, they put a restriction. Did they have the right to do so? Well, most people thought this is a good amendment, so nobody really objected, except perhaps some people in Congress party might have been unhappy that Mrs. Gandhi didn't become Rani of this country. But now we are safe. Nobody can amend the constitution. Of course, if the revolution, the constitution is burnt up and a military coup takes place, that's another matter. But under the present constitution, multi-party democracy, secularism, and secularism is not defined, so I can define it my way. Secularism only means you have right to worship your way. That's all. Doesn't mean anything more than that. That is my definition. Favoring minorities is not secularism. I don't accept that definition. So we are 80% Hindu. How can I say that I should favor minorities? Yes, minorities will get fundamental rights, minorities will get equal rights, and equal rights will be for women also. So triple talaq will remove, soon will remove inheritance laws also for Muslim women, because they have to be brought on equal. See, our society originally was the most pro-woman society. Draupadi's sari was pulled, so Mahabharata was. Sita was kidnapped, so Lanka was destroyed. That is the status of women. If you look at God's cabinet, Brahma's cabinet, the most important portfolios are with women. Education with Saraswati, finance with Lakshmi, defense with Durga. Tell me one male God, has he got one portfolio? Yes, one portfolio. Information broadcasting to Narad Muni. Can you believe that? We worship our country is Bharat Mata. We do Saraswati Puja, Lakshmi Puja, Durga Puja. So that was the status for women. Yes, we have recognized that women physical strength is less than men, but society is based on brains, and on that we are equal. That was the situation which I have to bring back, because the intervening period was a very anti-woman period. Many of these bad practices that you see today because of that. So therefore, you know your culture and you have to work towards it. When therefore this matter of Nirbhaya came up and found that the man was juvenile by a few days and he escaped. So I wanted to change the law. That time Congress was in power, so I could not get it done by Parliament. So I went to the Supreme Court on a public interest litigation. And Justice Sadasivam and Gogoi and one other, they gave, the three judges gave a judgment. What did I say? I said that if a man commits, if a boy, even if he's juvenile, commits murder or rape, he knows what he was doing. If a young boy robbed a pastry from a bakery shop or a cycle from a cycle stand, he need not be put in with the criminals. He need not be tried under this IPC. But if he commits these two crimes, then he must be treated as an adult. If he is capable of rape, if he is capable of murder, then he should be treated as an adult. So I argued in court that present laws don't apply, but the court can modify the law. So the court said, but that is only the power of Parliament, how can we modify? Then I took out an English case of Lord Denning, which gave the Greek phrase casus omissus. How many of you have heard of casus omissus? You have heard of it? What does it say?
That which is sad.
Alright, you have heard the name. Let me tell you what it means. Casus omissus means what is omitted. And case by case of omission. So supposing the court feels that original intention of Parliament was to include that Juvenile Act will also provide this exception, but overlooked it, and therefore we are temporarily introducing it into the law till Parliament either confirms it or rejects it. So this is a big thing, that now the Supreme Court has the power to alter laws. Second, in the past the Supreme Court was generally looking at whether something is according to law or not according to law. but it now enlarged it. Even if it is according to law, but its application is arbitrary or unreasonable, then also the court can strike it. This happened with me in the Ram Setu case, where the Setu Samudram project was prepared by the UPA to cut through Ram Setu. Everything was legally done. Parliament passed the bill, the budget, provided the bill, the shipping ministry created the project. Now, how do I go to the court and say, no, you can't cut through Ram Setu? Some of the Shankaracharyas and all the gurus, sannyasis, everybody went in a petition collectively to say it hurts our religious feeling. The court said this is a development project, how does it hurt anybody's religious feeling? It's only a bridge, and we are not destroying the bridge, we're just allowing it to cut through. How can it be? So when they lost, Ashok Singhal of the Vishnu Parishad came to my house with RSS chief Sudarshan and said, you must now take this up and stop it. So I said, how can I do it? I mean, you got all this Adhivakta Parishad and all this. Asked one of them, said, no, Ashok Singhal has had a dream that Ramakrishna has said only Swami can do it. It's a way of fooling me, but doesn't matter. So I said, how much time do I have? They said within the next 1 week they are going to use RDX and blow it up. So you have to go fast. I don't know ABC of Ram Setu project, the Setu Samudram project. How can? No, you have to do it. So anyway, I sat all night and worked. And I said, how do I go? The court has already rejected the Shankaracharyas. I can't go back and tell the court that this is a religious matter. They'll fine me. They'll put a big fat fine on me. So I came up with a new argument. I said, why is this Setu Samudram project being implemented? That the ships, instead of going around Sri Lanka, for Kanyakumari to Madras, Chennai, you can't go through by the shortest route because there's Ram Setu in the way. So therefore, either you put a canal by cutting Ram Setu, or you have to go by the more expensive route of going around Sri Lanka. Now, how could I argue against that? I said there is one argument. I went to court. I argued that, you see, they are putting the project cost at 3,000 crores. Now, object of that is that you can go straight now from Kanyakumari to, the ship can go straight from Kanyakumari to Chennai. I suggest an alternative. Put a railway line from Kanyakumari to Chennai. Let all the ships put their containers in Kanyakumari and have a line from the port of Kanyakumari to Chennai. That project will cost only 600 crores. And it will take less time than the ship. So therefore, the present alternative has been chosen without considering the alternatives. The cheapest alternative should have been picked. That is the public interest. So public taxpayers are being used for a project for expenses. And therefore, even if you cut a channel under the water, on the ground of the sea, every day some mud will be put in, so you have to go on excavating. So I said this is a waste of public money, and so the alternative is cheaper, so therefore this project should be scrapped. The court was convinced, but one judge said to me, what is so special about this Ram Setu? Who will go to the middle of the ocean to pray? So I said, Your Lordship,